Hey, Story team. My name is Brian Bennett. I am a pastor in St. Louis. I'm also a leadership coach, and just want to take a moment to walk you through the assessment so that you understand kind of the dynamics of the assessment. But first, I want to say I'm really excited for what's going on with Story for the team. I've looked over your profiles and just seeing the uniqueness that each of you brings, and just hearing Justin, hearing his heart for the city of Westerville and what's ahead for you guys there. I'm really excited. I believe it seems clear that God has called you there and that God is going to do incredible things through there, through Story, and redeem the story of Westerville, redeem the stories that are in Westerville represented by those lives that are so important to God. And so as He's commissioned you and as you head out on this new pioneering journey, I just want to encourage you that it's exciting to watch from St. Louis. And I know that we highlighted the team and the calling to Westerville in a recent highlight of our missions blog for our church. We have some connections back to Justin. And Justin is a real gift of a pastor and a leader. Having known him and served beside him on the staff and watched him serve in ministry, you have a great pastor and a great leader in him. So what I want to do is walk you quickly through the assessment, kind of give you a broad overview so that you can make sense of it, and then dive a little bit deeper on a couple key pieces. So the assessment's broken up into a few sections. The first section is behaviors, and that's pages 3 through 24. And behaviors is how we typically do something. So it's the pattern of our outward behavior. So behaviors is something, if I were to follow you around with a video camera and watch you, that's what behaviors is picking up, how we tend to act in typical situations. Now, obviously, there are some dynamics that can change our behaviors depending on the people we're around or the environment we're in, but normally there's a pattern to our behaviors, and especially if you took this through the lens of a normal church serving environment, there'll be some specific patterns there. We're not completely different at work than we are at home. We can be, but normally there's patterns that show up, and if we are completely different, it's for reasons where we're adjusting our behavior, and maybe right or wrong, but we're adjusting our behavior significantly. So behaviors is what I would expect to see if I followed someone around with a video camera. It's kind of what's observable externally, and it's really not good or bad. I know for some of us, we read the reports and we read a statement and we put a judgment to it. Is this a good? Do I want this? Is this how I want to be described? But it's not really good or bad, because for everything that seems positive, there's a potential weakness or an overuse of it. For everything that we might look at and say, there's a negative to it, well, there's also an upside to it. So if someone's too direct sometimes, or maybe can be too forceful in their communication, the upside is, in those cases for that person, is you're never going to have to guess where you stand with them. And for some of us, if we're not direct enough in our communication, then it creates a lack of safety on the opposite end, where people are always guessing, where do I stand with this person? So as you look at the statements, try not to attach values to them. Try to think about, when I'm at my best, how can this help me? How can I use this to help me? When I'm not at my best, what do I have to watch for in terms of an overuse of a strength or a blind spot that we might unintentionally come across in a certain way, hurt someone's feeling, cause some tension that's just not necessary. So that's behaviors, pages 3 through 24. Driving forces is pages 25 through 33. Driving forces is the why behind our behavior. It's what's inside of us. So I can't observe this with a video camera. It's what's inside of you that drives you to act. And as you look at those categories, to really understand driving forces, it's about understanding the continuum that is there with the driving forces. So as you think about the driving forces page, there's a continuum between commanding and collaborative, and it's saying, where do you fit on that continuum? Are you more commanding, which means you're more driven by status or recognition or control, or are you more collaborative? And someone who's more collaborative is driven to be more in a supporting role, doesn't necessarily need to have as much control of their personal freedom, just really wants to blend in, versus the person who kind of wants to stand out or take charge or have more control. So some of those themes in the driving forces section, like I don't like the term commanding, and I don't like the naming of altruistic, because I think people who score low in altruism normally get defensive. People who score high in commanding normally get defensive. Don't read those terms or the absence of those terms as something's wrong with me, or I'm not as like Jesus as I thought I was. Commanding is a good thing, and the term isn't helpful, but the actual meaning of it, those people show up a lot of times. They're willing to take charge in a group. Are driven to take charge in a group. But the collaborative, or they want to really have a high say on the outcome. And collaborative is a bonus as well for those people who are more willing to blend in, who aren't as don't feel the need as much to take charge in a group. So all of these things are on a continuum, and that's really what we're thinking about is, am I helping others and I'm just kind of losing track of time as I help them because all I care about is helping them well and the quality of the outcome? Or am I really paying attention to the clock and the investment of resources and how much money we put in? So you can imagine on a team or in a church ministry team where how some people think maybe a certain outreach or missional activity is a good idea regardless of the outcome, and others are saying, well, is this the right return on investment? And they're thinking more about, hey, is what we're doing is it wise stewardship? Well, both of those, helping people for the sake of helping, is really positive and I think aligns with scriptures. I also think being a wise steward aligns with scriptures. So that's a good example of the tension. Someone who's structured, who's used to more of a traditional method. Hey, if it's worked in the past, then I can rely on it. I like structure. I like predictability. I want to see how things have worked in the past versus someone who's more receptive in their driving forces, who's looking for the new and different, who's hungry for the new and different, who feels most alive when they're in the new and different. So let's just say you were high in receptivity. That was one of your drivers. To be aware of the strength that you are going to be driven towards the new and different, but also be aware of the potential downside of that is you may sometimes overlook what's necessary in this moment isn't something new and different, but it's something that's been predictable. It's something that other people have already done. We don't need to recreate the wheel here. And so for those who are more structured to recognize when, hey, being consistent and having a very structured, rhythmic approach and a very looking backward approach to decision making and all that, that's a real positive. You're very stable in the organization or on the team. But there are times where we need to risk, we need to stretch, we need to try the new and the different, and that's going to be more uncomfortable for the structured than for the receptive. So that's just one example of how to use the driving forces, is recognize there's a continuum, and as you look at those graphs afterwards, it's mapping you out on the continuum of those graphs. And once again, it's not good or bad. It's just, how do I steward this well, and how God has wired me, and what could be an overuse of it, or what could be where I'm not using it at my best. Like if you're not using structure at your best, you're only doing past ideas, right? If you're not using receptivity at your best, you only care about new ideas, not necessarily the best idea in this situation. We're getting tunnel vision there. And then on pages 34 through 39, there's an integration. And if you're going to focus somewhere in the report, I focus in on pages 34 through 39. That integration of driving forces and behaviors, it's taking those two things and it's putting them together there. And so it's really important that you process through those bullet points on 34 through 39 and say, yeah, that's just like me, no, that's not like me. I think this is accurate. And what we're looking for is a 60 to 70% accuracy of the report. So many times I hear people tell me, hey, this is either really accurate of me, or I don't think this is accurate at all. And then they go and they talk to someone else, and that person says, no, that's you, right? So this report can be a really good tool for self-awareness for us. And I just talked with someone recently, I was coaching them, who there was a section of the report, and they're a young leader, and they kept telling me, it's not like me, I'm not forceful in conversations, it's not my way or the highway, which is one of the things the report said. And she said, I'm a people pleaser. And I said, okay, well, either you're putting forth a lot of effort to control this part of your behavior, or this just isn't true of you. And so for right now, let's just assume that's not true of you. So what I would say is, if you're reading in the driving forces or the behavior section and you say, hey, I don't think this is true of me, then go ask some friends who will be honest with you. Don't be defensive. Don't just ask them, say, hey, I just want to know what's accurate of me in this report, what's not. Or, hey, do you see this sometimes? Help me see this. And if they say it's not accurate, they don't see it, and you talk to some wise counsel around you, then just let it go and assume it's not, but be open to the possibility that the report could open our eyes up to something. The last part that we're going to talk about is the competency section, which is pages 40 to 45. And in the competency section, it's really laying out core skills. Now, obviously, it doesn't lay out spiritual gifts, but it lays out some core skills as we reflected on those questions, and it's going to map those out from most skillful to least skillful. And once again, it's really helpful to think about how accurate is that competency section, and how do I play to my strengths? What things might I need to delegate as we launch story, and what things might somebody else be a better fit at? Or what things do I absolutely have to work on because they're not a strength and I can't delegate it, but I'm responsible for something. So I've got to grow a little bit in personal organization to make this, homeless ministry work, or I've got to grow a little bit in this area for the sake of whatever ministry thing that we're doing. So as we look at our strengths, we want to maximize how we're hardwired for our high contribution zone. We want to delegate things that we're not great at, and if we can't do those two things, then sometimes we've got to mitigate by just getting incrementally better in something that we're never going to be great at. But for this moment on this team, because of those reasons, we have to just get a little bit better. So that's the overview of the report, and one of the best usages of the report is to just process through some of the sections and just say, hey, who's all the D's, right? Raise your hand. And the D's tend to be those who's prominently, the high D's are those who run towards decisions. They normally, decide to go climb the mountain, and then they figure out later what tools they need. Once they're on the way up, they start having a conversation about what tools they need and how to do it. They jump towards opportunity. They're not afraid to cross their comfort zones. They move quick. The low Ds tend to be cautious. So if you're low in a D, that just means you tend to be a little bit more cautious. You're going to let somebody else jump first. You're not going to be the first mover. You might come in second or third, but you're not going first. You're going to, very likely, depending on the rest of your report, make a better plan or a fuller plan, or slow things down a little bit. The high I, the higher the yellow on the bar graph that you have, the more that someone's going to try to seek to influence others through the warmth and the power of their presence, like their persuasion, their emotions, their warmth. They're going to really try to connect with you on a personal level. It means a lot to them to connect with people. These are more of the social butterflies, tend to be, doesn't have to be, but tend to be, they like a lot of touches with a lot of people, but they like connecting and they like influencing. The lower the yellow bar, the lower the I, the more they're going to seek to influence just through pure logic, the strength of their argument, not the strength of their presence. Does that make sense? So they're looking, as you're talking, they're thinking, does 1 + 1 here equal 2? They don't care how persuasive or how nice or how warm you are. Someone who's low in the eyes, all they're thinking about is does 1 + 1 equal 2 here? And so for them, there's a real strength. Sometimes their weakness can be suspicion, or they devalue sometimes. They lack the ability to connect with people in that warm way. Whereas sometimes those who are high in I can be great at connecting with people, but may not always think through all the facts, depending on the rest of the report, because everyone's a blender. Those who are high S tend to be a little bit more stoic in their emotional, the way they carry their emotions. They look for a higher structure. They want predictable, typically. They're predictable, so you always know how they're showing up. That's one of the strengths of the high S. You always know how a high S is going to show up. And then those who are on the low S are more, they like an environment that changes more often. They're going to be a little bit more up and down, perhaps show you a little bit more of their emotions. The higher the C, the more cautious, the more rule following they are. The lower the C, the more that they see rules as a speed bump on the way to figuring things out, is a fun way to put that. But they are more of gonna, like, rules are kind of get in the way of things the lower the C, and so there's sometimes can be a tension between the high C's who are rule followers and the low C's who don't follow, once again depending on the rest of their blending. So that's a big picture of the DISC, and it's really a blending that takes place there. So the higher the D, the lower the D, how high above the energy line, that's what that bar is going across, that's the energy line. The more it's above the energy line, the greater it's a factor for that person in determining their behavior. And then you have the natural versus the adapted when you're looking at the graphs in the lower right-hand corner. And the natural is how we are without our environment, without any influence of our environment. So if I could take you, put you in, just kind of put you in a room, and there's nothing influencing you, and I could that's how you would tend to be without your environment. Our adapted, they say, is how we are within our environment. So there may be things in our environment that we are adapting our behavior, and we all adapt our behavior, and that's actually a real strength to be able to adapt our behavior. If we can't adapt at all, then we can be rigid, and there can be conflict there. The more we adapt, the greater the adaptation, the more we run into the possibility for higher stress. And that's where we want to match up people to their best environments. We want to recognize where people's greatest strengths, passions, driving forces are, and help them get into those environments. And we don't want to leave people forever in an environment that's way outside if they can't delegate and they're having to do things that'll burn them out. So as we kind of bring this to a close, here's the key with these reports. We want to use them to complement each other, not collide. And every team has conflict, there's healthy conflict, but then there's the conflict where we just are colliding all the time. We're not understanding each other, we're not appreciating each other. And what these reports do is they help us maximize our teamwork by bringing the best of ourselves, by bringing the best out of others, by understanding and appreciating others. We're then able to work best together as a team, get each person in their high contribution zone, understand each other's when we are going in different, have different approaches to problems or opportunities or influencing each other, and slow down to understand each other so that we have that appreciation. Story, I'm excited for what's ahead. May God go before you. May His grace be sufficient for you, and may God write a grand story through the story team.